Shut up and sit down.
We are back. This is Inside Wisconsin. Trevor Thomas, John Anderson, Wisconsin native and two-time U.S. Open champion Andy North joins us on today's episode. All right, Andy, so we were talking about the Ryder Cup and it coming to Whistling Straits in September and how we're actually going to be able to have fans. It's going to be great. But let's talk about Steve Stricker for a second, knowing that he, too, is from Wisconsin and getting to captain the Ryder Cup in his backyard. As a guy that paved the way, what does that mean to you, Andy?
That's really neat. I was lucky enough to serve as a co-captain with Steve and the 14 Ryder Cup team. The players have great respect for Steve. He'll do a great job. Unfortunately, too often the captain gets too much good, bad, indifferent, whatever it is. The guys still have to play. But Steve will do a great job. And to be able to be the captain in your home state, and he's been able to be captain longer than anybody. He's basically gone two captaincies, and we haven't even played yet. So it'll be really exciting for him, and he's been gracious enough to give us some opportunities to be up there that week. So it'll be a fun week.
Yeah, and listen, he is a terrific golfer and a terrific guy. And as Wisconsin golf goes, right, last week you did not win at the AmFam, right? But our boy Jerry Kelly did, didn't he?
Yeah, it was a great week for that. Steve played nicely on Sunday and finished the top 10. So those guys did what they were supposed to do. The other guy didn't handle it very well. So,
listen, I don't think anybody was expecting that you were going to go ahead and win. I think it's great that you went out and played. That we came through here, and so we got the Ryder Cup. When I see Whistling Straits, by the way. And I don't want to make anybody at Kohler angry with me. I love the Straits course, but I tell people when you look at the Straits course, work with me here, Andy. I don't know. I say that's not really what our coastline looks like on Lake Michigan. That looks like the Michigan side. I said, I think I prefer the river course because you go out there, right? And that's what Wisconsin looks like.
Yeah, I think the river course is more difficult.
Yeah, it's hard, but it's beautiful. But like, if you want to tell people, here's what Wisconsin looks like. You could see a guy in a tree stand up there, maybe, if that was allowed, right? I just think that's more of what our topography in Wisconsin looks like. If you want to feel for Wisconsin, it's not the Straits course, it's the river course.
Well, in the river course, we used to play one of the qualifiers there for the World Match Play back in the around 2000 somewhere. Yeah. And the guys really struggled there. They can set up the river course where it's almost impossible. The greens are treacherous to putt. They don't have great big moguls and mounds and stuff in them, but there's a lot of little stuff there. When they get up to 13 on the stent meter, they're almost impossible. And the guys really struggled there, and they basically said they didn't want to come back. Hard. So, but that's really a Wisconsin golf course.
Let's talk more Wisconsin. I'm going to reach back over here because in addition to golf, right? And I don't ever think of you a Gator, right? Here's our man right there at a Badger game. He was very nice. I got to sit with him, entertain me, even though we went to the Northwestern game and they decided they didn't want to score any points in the freaking first half of that game. I don't think I've ever seen you Gator clap. I know you played there. I don't think of you anymore at a Gator than I think that you can fly. How did you get yourself so ingratiated into the athletic department there from top to bottom, especially basketball?
Well, it goes way back. My dad was a coach, very successful high school, both football and basketball, and then left coaching after he brought a team to the state tournament 2 years in a row in Madison, and then retired from coaching after that second year and went back to the university and got his PhD, and then was a professor here for a bunch of years. And all his friends were, as he would say, jocks. Donnie Mansfield, the baseball coach, a guy named Dutch Leonard, who owned the biggest sporting goods store in town, and George Christ, who was an assistant football coach, and guys that were in athletics that he had known through his coaching. So I was always around. As a kid, I sat up in the top of the third deck of the field house by myself when I was a kid, going to games. When we beat Ohio State, when they're number one there, I was in the building. Really, you're always around it. Got recruited to stay here, and I made a decision that from a golf standpoint, if I was going to play golf, I needed to go someplace warm. If I decided I was going to play basketball, there was a chance I might have stayed here and played. But I've always been involved. And then when we moved back into town, we moved in the same neighborhood that Dave McClain moved in. We got to be great buddies. I got involved with the football team and ended up being on the field as a coach with them for 6 or 7 years before Dave died. And then at that same time, Bo was an assistant who, this is back in the late 70s when he was here. We used to play Sunday morning. We had a game in the field house on Sunday mornings with a bunch of the coaches and stuff. So, I've been around. They gave me a key to a room upstairs to hit balls into a mat in the winter when I was in high school. So
wow,
I grew up in the back of the stadium, the back of the field house. And, the decision I made obviously was important to go to college in Florida. It was a great experience for me. Had a lot of success there, and it probably helped my golf. I don't know if I would be where I am without those 4 years in Florida. But at the same time, I'm Badger through and through, and I've caught a lot of heat when the 2 or 3 times that we've played Florida in the tournament, or we did a home and home with Florida a few years back in basketball. That didn't go well. When I walked into the O'Connell Center in Gainesville and sat behind our bench, that didn't go very well.
So and let's be honest, your access is second to none with all the programs. So I'm curious, a lot of the times where we see you in the stands, we all are living that vicariously through you at these amazing games. I think of Kentucky and then the national championship that didn't go as well as we wanted. But I'm more curious about, what is your favorite Badger moment that none of us got to see that you could share a story? What's the best behind the scenes moment with Andy North?
There's been so many, but I think the absolute best one, and it might be my favorite athletic moment that I was involved in. It might be means as much as maybe winning the Opens. In 1979, I made my first trip with the football team, and it was Dave's second year. We had, oh my gosh, we must have had 15 freshmen starting. I mean, it was, these were still kids. I mean, these were kids playing. We went over to Michigan. They just absolutely hammered us, 59-0. They scored 2 touchdowns in the last, maybe it was 49-0. They scored 2 touchdowns in the last 5 minutes of the game, throwing the ball to run up the score to move up in the polls. And Bo Schembechler was the coach. I was so mad. I went out and I jumped in his face and absolutely wore him out. Dave would to him after the game, and he was probably Dave's best friend in coaching. Dave wouldn't talk to him after the game, so I took it upon myself to support my buddy, and I went out there and I just got after him. I mean, absolutely just wore him out. Well, so then the next year, our guys grew up a little bit, and this was the Greenwood, Vandenboom, Mohab, Jostin, Crumry group of kids.
Just Cole.
The next year, they played in Madison. These guys were all sophomores, and it ended up that they beat us about 21-7 or something. But it was a pretty competitive game. Our guys are maturing. The next year we opened up with them. They were number 1 in the country. And we really prepared for them. Spring ball, the whole deal. We were like 18, 19-point underdogs. If you knew anything about football, it was the greatest bet of all time. It was absolutely the greatest bet of all time. And we just absolutely manhandled. The final score was only 21-14, but we absolutely manhandled. Tim Crumry must have had 100 tackles that game. He was the best player, as good a player as I've ever seen on the football field that day. It was amazing. We just pounded them. I think they got 1 first down in the second half. It was a physical beating like Wisconsin had never given to Michigan. And that locker room after that game, the same group of kids that 2 years before got beat 59-0 or 49-0 by this team, now beat the number 1 team in the country. To me, that was one of the great moments of all time.
That's cool.
Trevor, you see how side I am? Because this is educating Trevor. Because you know what else happened that year? They beat Ohio State.
And Purdue.
And they beat Mark Herman and Purdue.
The first time.
And lost to Iowa and didn't go to the Rose Bowl. And I was at the Iowa game. Broke my heart. Broke my heart. Number 1 to start the season. Took him out. I can see every part of it. I can see every play.
The best.
Jess Cole was Mondovi, Wisconsin, right? He and Crumry were teammates from Little Mondovi, Wisconsin. He was the quarterback. Trevor has no idea what we're talking about. He thinks
that's all right. I'm taking it in.
It never happened.
And the quarterback, if Randy Wright hadn't gotten hurt the week before the first game of the season.
Yeah. I think that perhaps the greatest athlete in Wisconsin history, as much as I'd like to say it's Pat Matzdorf, it might be David Greenwood.
Absolutely. I agree. Absolutely. He was basically drafted in all sports. Here's a funny David story. He used to go over during spring football. He'd go over. The track coach made him go.
Yeah.
He'd go over there in his sweats that he's going to practice for spring ball, and he'd jump 6'9" once, and then come over to spring practice. So he ends up. We go through a spring game, and the next week is the Big Ten. Must have been indoors.
Mm-hmm.
That guy plays a football game, and 2 or 3 days later jumps 7 foot and wins the Big Ten. Yeah, he was an unbelievable baseball player. Unbelievable. He's turned pro, John. He's a professional golfer.
Right, and now he does that. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, he's unbelievable athlete, crazy human being, but one of my guys. One of my group of guys from that year.
He was terrific, and then we've seen this explosive growth in basketball. Right? You mentioned 1979. I tell people all the time, if you remember the last game of the regular season, right? Wes Matthews and Stretch Gregory and those guys, they beat Magic Johnson and Michigan State team that went on and won the national title that year.
Last game.
I think was that Cofield or the coach? But we kind of had he looked like he was going to be great, and then it looked like we kind of went down for a while, and then it looked like we got just Stu Jackson, and he got the kid from Chicago, and here we go, and then he was gone, and then we had Stan, and he was for a year, and it finally took Dick Bennett to get in there, and then it's just been this steady, I shouldn't say meteoric, but it's a steady rise that program now, that's a top 10, top 15 place to go play basketball.
If you look at over the last 20 years, you look at UW football and UW basketball. If you add NCAA tournaments for basketball, bowl games for football, there's nobody in the country even close to what we've. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think we've gone to 39 out of 40. And the next best is like about 32 or something. I mean, it's a joke. And then you add volleyball and hockey and so many of the other sports here. It's amazing what's been accomplished here the last 20, 25 years. If you go back and look at not only the good teams, but the great kids that have come through here that, you're really proud of when you sit and listen to them after a game, being interviewed or they stand up and are doing some amazing things off the field. The number of all Big Ten academics and all American academics, it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible.
Speaking of good guys, can you name 2 players better than Joe Thomas?
There's not many. He could arguably the best lineman that's come through here. We had a kid in that early year, Paul Gruber, that was same kind of player, exactly the same kind of player. Went to Tampa and played 10, 12 years at Tampa, was an all-pro and was really a good player. There's been so many of those guys who have come through here that no one else wanted, or they were, they might have been 3-star guys. I mean, JJ, for example. Mm-hmm. Here's a guy that he's tight end at where Western Michigan or Eastern Michigan or Central.
Central. He was a directional Michigan.
Yeah, exactly.
It wasn't Ann Arbor, Michigan, is what it wasn't.
It's hard to argue that he's not in the top 10 defensive players in the history of the NFL.
Andy, you have no idea how grateful I am that answer wasn't as definitive as it could have been, that indeed Joe Thomas was the best ever.
He made a list of his best 5 Badgers since Barry took over. I took pre-Barry, and he took post-Barry. He tried to tell me that maybe Joe Thomas was like the 5th best Badger. He just doesn't have a.
I do know this, at least. 2016, Andy, you had one of the most Wisconsin foursomes in the scramble for the AmFam championship. It was you, Steve Stricker, Mark Tauscher, and Brett Favre. Please share with us a story of that group.
That was, we've had awesome groups every year, but that was the first year. Steve hadn't turned 50 yet, so the tour let him play that Saturday afternoon. And of course, being the star and the host, he got Favre. And, and Tauscher and I, they put the 2 cripples together. And, that's so we made a really big deal, and we had so much fun that day. Tausch is an amazing athlete. I don't think people have any understanding what a good athlete Mark Tauscher is. Great feet, great hand-eye, wonderful tennis player. He really moves. I mean, you'd be shocked to watch him move. And so we basically named ourselves the Washington Generals against the Harlem Globetrotters. And we got in their kitchen on the very first tee, and we never let up. We are all the time apologizing for to be there, whatever. But, I do believe that the Washington Generals beat the Globetrotters once in 25,000 games. But it ended up that Tausch and I played great. We ended up beating them, and we never let them forget it. It was so much fun.
You have a different relationship than most other people with Aaron Rodgers. That's just a genuine good friend that you have. But as you look at this situation, we've got everybody sitting at a 4-way stop, right? Goody's at 1, Aaron's at 1, Coach LaFleur's at 1, and Murphy's at 1, and nobody knows whose turn it is to go.
Right.
As you see this, what do you make of it?
It really saddens me that it could ever get to this point. I don't know all that much exactly what's going on, but you have a sense of, like everybody else, that, and it's in most cases, it ends up being a communication issue. And, if you had better communication, maybe some of these things wouldn't get to this point. Let's just hope that they can figure out some way to make this work, and we can get everybody back and win a Super Bowl this year, because they possibly could still do that. Last year was disappointing the way the season ended, and there's a lot of guys that got some chips on their shoulders, and I think they're ready to really play some good football. So let's hopefully they can get this figured out and do what's right.
I was just going to say, it's the only 4-way stop in the entire state of Wisconsin where the person's just going, no, you go first. No, you go. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's that Midwest nice, let's let it go, and no one will do it. So, yeah, I hope they get something figured out. And, he loves being a Packer and wanted to finish his career as a Packer, and let's hopefully something good can happen.
Amen to that. Back to wrap up with Andy North after this. Helpful critiques, ideas, great stories, people we should know, the great bar in your town, the fish fry you want to know, the fish boil, anything that you want to reach out to us with. We are happy. We are here. You can be the inputters. We're here to listen.
Shut up and sit down.